We should be live streaming, and I'm just waiting for confirmation before we commence the meeting. I can confirm we're now live streaming, so the meeting can commence.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Brian Kenny, and I'm chair of the Community Safety and Protection Committee. And before I go any further, can I just apologise for the late start of the meeting this afternoon, but we've had a few technical issues, and thank you for your patience. But I'll now move on to explain how the meeting will work. During the meeting, all microphones and cameras will be switched off, with the exception of myself as chair and any presenting officers other than as directed by the meeting facilitator. Should anyone leave the meeting for any reason, the meeting will continue unless it is no longer quorate. Please ensure that any items relating to personal, private or confidential or exempt information are not visible through your camera or screen sharing until any press and public have been excluded from the meeting. Please be advised that all proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and broadcast on YouTube Live for members of the public to see. Please ensure that when you're not speaking, your microphone remains on mute and your camera is switched off. And if any member wishes to speak at any point, please turn on your camera, raise your hand, or alternatively indicate via the chat function. The meeting facilitator will then unmute your microphone and invite you to speak at the appropriate time. You should then click to confirm that you wish to unmute your microphone and then state your question or make your comment. Please do not try to unmute yourself. The meeting facilitator will do this for you. There will be a slight delay, and then you'll be prompted to allow yourself to be unmuted, and please select the blue button that says unmute now to do so. When I request you all to approve or note an item, I will ask you to turn on your camera, and the meeting's facilitator will then unmute everyone. If you have any issues, this will be your opportunity to raise them, and silence will be taken as approval. Now, I need to confirm now that the following members are in attendance and that all members present can hear and be heard. First of all, as myself as chair, we have Councillor Doreen Knight, Councillor Jan Grace, Councillor Edna Finneran, Councillor Lynne Maloney, Councillor Allan Brame, Councillor Emily Spurrell, Councillor Lynne Thompson, and Councillor Paul Tweed. So as long as everybody can confirm that they can see and hear, we'll proceed to the agenda. So the first item really is apologies for absence, and unless anybody contradicts me, we have no apologies from members, and I can confirm that all members are present at this meeting. Can I ask, do we have any declarations of interest that need to be made at this stage? No. Okay, in that case we'll move on, and I can confirm that we have no matters of urgency to be admitted onto the agenda today. And I can also confirm that there are no items on today's agenda that require the exclusion of press and public. So we need to now approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Could members now please turn on your cameras by clicking the start video in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. At the same time, the meeting facilitator will unmute everyone to provide you with an opportunity to raise any issues with regard to the minutes of the last meeting. If anybody wishes to raise anything, please click to confirm you'd like your microphone to be unmuted and make your comments then. So can I ask, has anybody got any comments or amendments to the minutes of the last meeting, please? No. In that case, I'll assume that the meeting is agreeing for the minutes of the last meeting to be approved. Okay. Thank you. If all members can now please turn your cameras off again, and we move on to the next item, which is agenda item 3 on the Bonfire Report for 2020. And I'll hand over now to the Chief Fire Officer, who's going to open the presentation on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and there is a presentation which will accompany this report, which we will ask Mike Baratti to provide insights to members very, very shortly. But the purpose of the report is to inform members of the outcomes of the bonfire period 2020 and recognising the difficult, challenging time that we've experienced due to COVID in regards to the management of the bonfire period, and a recommendation that members note the content of the report and the impact of COVID has had on the delivery of the bonfire plan. And what Mike will do, will take you through the performance. He'll pick up on some of the highlights. He'll pick up on some of the challenges that we've faced during the period, and then he'll give you the performance in relation to the work undertaken and any next and future steps, taking away the learning from the period as well. So I'll without any further ado, I'll hand you across to Mike Baratti, and Mike Baratti will take you through the presentation, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mike, thank you.
Just going to try and share my screen, hopefully, if technology allows. Can I just have confirmation? Kelly, is that visible on the screen?
Yeah, that's showing fine, Mike, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just going to run through some of the key points of this year's bonfire period. As the Chief stated, it was a difficult time for us with the impact of COVID and the impact that had on this year's bonfire plan and the challenges that we faced. So there's a summary on the screen there, and I'll just go through some of the highlights. So we experienced a 10.3% increase in ASB fires or deliberate secondary fires over the bonfire period. For the purpose of the presentation, and when we refer to the bonfire period, the Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, that period is from the 19th of October to the 7th of November, and that's consistent every year for the purpose of statistical recording. Unfortunately, our fire crews suffered 8 incidents of violence at work over this bonfire period. That was a reduction of 1 compared to the previous year. The arson team carried out 65 target hardening visits. That's where arson had been threatened or used as a weapon towards a person or a property. We attended 16 firework incidents. So these are incidents whereby a property or vehicle has been damaged or a person has been injured by a firework and the misuse of fireworks. So this doesn't include ASB related firework incidents. Merseyside Police hold that data, and we will touch upon that a little bit later on in the presentation. And also our staff and volunteers removed 52.38 tonnes of bonfire material. So this is via hired tipper trucks that are either hired by Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service or loaned from partner agencies or funded by partner agencies. And we place our staff onto them, and over the bonfire period, we receive referrals from the public and partner agencies, and we remove combustible materials off the streets of Merseyside. So that's quite an impressive figure. And that material, if hadn't have been collected, potentially may have been used as fuel for a deliberate secondary fire. Just have a little look over the last 5 years. These are the numbers of deliberate secondary fires attended over the bonfire period. We were on a downward trend. This year we have experienced a slight increase. But of course, we are going to highlight the fact that this period was heavily impacted in relation to COVID-19. There was no diversionary activities. So, for example, the River of Light firework display, which ordinarily would have attracted tens of thousands of people, and all the local authority firework displays were all cancelled. And virtually all activities that would have been put on over the bonfire period were cancelled due to COVID. Therefore, there literally wasn't anything by means of diversionary activities for members of the public over the bonfire period. we are going to touch upon in the next couple of slides a little bit of the rationale around that increase and the changes we made to our tactics during the bonfire period in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So the reason we've highlighted a particular period on the right-hand side of this graph is between the 1st and 6th of November. Under normal circumstances, we would adopt a tolerant approach to bonfires, and that allows operational fire crews during that period only throughout the year to carry out a dynamic risk assessment of a bonfire and potentially leave that bonfire to burn if there's, for example, responsible adults in attendance and the fire is not going to spread or affect people or property, for example. This year, we didn't believe that approach was appropriate due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we changed our response. So we removed that tolerant approach away from operational crews. We didn't think it was right that we left fires burning, which would essentially have gathered a crowd around that fire. So we actually adopted principles very much similar to Merseyside Police in relation to the 4E approach. And that was adopted by our operational crews and our staff on the ground. So our arson teams and street intervention teams who are out on a nightly basis engaging with members of the public. So we adopted the 4Es in order for the staff to engage, explain, encourage. And that last E would usually be for Merseyside Police enforce. We adopted extinguish. So after all those three approaches, engage, explain and encourage, the fire crew would ultimately extinguish the fire, but explaining to the public why they were going to do so, because of course the public are very much used to our tolerant approach and have been for a number of years. What we did do in order to record how our approach is going to have an impact is where a fire crew did extinguish a fire that under normal circumstances they would have left. We tagged the incident to enable us to look at those numbers of incidents that we ordinarily, without COVID-19 pandemic, would have left to burn. So we attended 43 incidents over that period where we decided where under normal circumstances we would have left the fire to burn, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic we had to extinguish, given the approach that we adopted this year. So that's 43 incidents that technically we could potentially remove from the data to show that we would have had a decrease under normal circumstances, and just to show the impact that had, the COVID-19 pandemic had on our statistics this year. Again, this just highlights by district over the whole bonfire period some of the performance. So if we look at Knowsley, Knowsley actually saw a decrease over the bonfire period of 23.3% in deliberate secondary fires. Liverpool, a very slight increase of 8.6%. Sefton, an increase of 68.4%. St Helens, a decrease of 11.4%. And the Wirral, an increase of 53.3%. But we did want to highlight there that obviously we were at the start of the bonfire period in tier 3 restrictions, and then on the 5th of November, we went into full lockdown. And we did have exceptionally limited diversionary activity. So throughout the bonfire period, we've constantly had to monitor the government guidance and change our tactics. So it was a really fluid and dynamic bonfire period for us, and exceptionally challenging. But the staff, the arson team, street intervention team, home safety teams and operational crews adapted exceptionally well to the challenge. Just around the outside of the screen there, we've broken it down into districts cumulatively, those increases. And also we wanted to highlight bonfire night as well, because we did experience quite a large increase compared to last year in terms of the number of deliberate secondary fires we actually extinguished. But again, that was due to the approach that we adopted this year, purely down to the COVID-19 pandemic. We wanted to interestingly compare some data sets. So we actually compared our data with Merseyside Police, because albeit we had an increase in deliberate secondary fires over the bonfire period, and cumulatively from April to November, we've had a slight increase as well. We still believe we've performed exceptionally well, and that our arson team and street intervention teams and operational crews have done still an outstanding job when you compare that to the issues that Merseyside Police have faced in terms of their antisocial behaviour data. So they experienced over the bonfire period a 48% increase in antisocial behaviour, and in that cumulative period of April to November 2020, they experienced a 44% increase in antisocial behaviour. So the issues that the police have faced clearly a lot worse than we have done. So still really good performance considering the challenges that we faced. We also wanted to highlight, I mentioned the firework incidents that we attended earlier. The police, of course, respond to a lot more firework-related incidents in terms of antisocial behaviour and misuse of fireworks on the streets and over the bonfire period compared to 2019. Merseyside police actually attended a 55% increase in firework-related antisocial behaviour. We wanted to highlight social media. Social media is really important to us, and it enables us to get our key messages out to members of the public, which last year's bonfire period, I suppose it was more important than ever because of the ever-changing advice from the government, which meant we had to change our tactics. So social media was really important to us, and we actually received some funding from Liverpool City Council to do what's known as a paid for social media campaign, which enables us to reach not only all our followers on social media, but everybody who has social media. Whether you follow our social media pages or not, you would have seen our key safety messages on your timeline. So just for example, on Facebook, we reached 1,106,587 members of the public on Facebook, and that's a massive number via social media. So some really impressive figures that we, in terms of members of the public, that we've reached on social media with some really important and key safety messages, particularly last year. This was just to highlight, this is something we've shared on social media, so it may well have been seen already, but we wanted to highlight as well as the challenges that were faced over the bonfire period and the work that was going on. We spoke to the bonfire period. We were still doing a lot of other work as well. For example, delivering prescriptions. We had street intervention teams deploying a lot more than they normally would do. Our youth engagement teams continued to work. There's some statistics in the bottom right around some of the courses that were run and some of the new programs that were run by youth engagement, and also some of the food and health and wellbeing parcels that were being delivered by prevention teams and operational crews. So all this really good work going on, as well as all the work bespoke to the bonfire period. Try to keep that as brief as possible. I know we were pushed for time, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Mike, just before you ask the authorities any questions that they want to pose, then we just want to touch on the utilisation of the body-worn cameras. Yeah, really good point, Chief. This year we were trialling body-worn cameras, so our street intervention team, arson team, and operational crews have been trialling a body-worn video camera, which sits on the jacket of the staff members. It's still early days into the trial, but some of the feedback we've had has been really positive, and the attitude change that they've seen with members of the public when we've been adopting that 4E approach and sort of challenging people around COVID-19 legislation and should they be out and around a gathering around a bonfire, for example. When they've noticed that our staff have had body-worn video cameras, their attitude has completely changed and they've sort of backed off and calmed down a lot. So early indications are that trial of the body-worn video cameras has been really successful, and we hope that we'll roll it out a lot more across the service this year to all our prevention staff and street intervention team staff who are working out in the community. But so far so good on the body-worn video camera trial. Thanks, Mike. In which case then, do you want to come off your screen share, please? And I'm sure members may have some questions for you to field, or area manager for that matter.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thanks very much for the presentation. I don't know whether you want to add any more, do you, Chief, before I throw it open for any questions or comments?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. What I would say is, I think Mike's emphasised the point that's been quite a challenge, and certainly some of the partners who we would lean on significantly have had other priorities, understandably, during the period, and as a result of that, we've had to deal with the matters that we've seen. Mike referenced the amount of tonnage of bonfire material or potential material that we've removed from the streets. Again, a really positive response in regards to that preventative proactive approach. And the crews, and the crew street intervention team and so on and so forth have worked tirelessly over the period, but we recognise the fact that it has been a little different. And members themselves will have witnessed, certainly over the actual bonfire period, where we've seen probably a little spike for ourselves, because we didn't have a lot of the diversion activities taking place across Merseyside. What families chose to do was have local firework displays, so a lot more fireworks were out in people's gardens, back gardens, and as a result of that, they had a lot more bonfires in their own homes, so to speak. And as a result of that, we've had to deal with that over the period. And again, that really kind of strategic response to dealing with those things at an early stage. We weren't prepared to allow groups of youths or groups of families, for that matter, gathered around the bonfire, with all best intentions, but the fact of the matter is, recognising that we were in the throes of a pandemic and a period of lockdown covered the period that we're referencing. So in partnership with our local authorities, with our police colleagues, the 4E's model that Mike alluded to there and described was absolutely appropriate under the circumstances. But as a result of that, we've probably had to deal with at least 43 incidents that we wouldn't ordinarily have dealt with. And as a result of that, our performance would have been, similar or better to previous years. But the fact of the matter is, we have worked tirelessly over the period and will do again next year, hopefully with a better set of circumstances that we're dealing with and far more engagement from some of our partners who would be ordinarily out on the streets with us, supporting that kind of whole systems approach. So a good outcome under the circumstances. It's self-evidently it's a little higher numbers of incidents that we've had to deal with this year, but the fact of the matter is the team have worked, as I say, tirelessly over the period, and it's positive from my perspective. And happy to take any questions equally, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Before I throw it open for members of the committee to make any comments or ask any questions, Mike, can I just ask you, one aspect of the report which concerns me is the obvious link between deliberate secondary fire incidents and levels of deprivation. Because as you said in the report, it's clearly identified that more deliberate fire incidents occur in areas of high deprivation as opposed to areas of least deprivation. Is there anything that we collectively can do to try and change that situation? What is the reason for it? Have you got any comments on that particular aspect, please?
Yes, Chair, we've recognised that. And in line with our partner agencies, we adopt a public health approach to the work that we do. So outside of the COVID-19 pandemic, we would hold monthly campaigns in hotspot areas with partner agencies. We had to stop doing that during the COVID-19 pandemic, but we do hope to pick that back up as soon as possible. And those target areas would absolutely be in those deprived areas where you can see the spikes in the deliberate secondary fires. And we get a good response from partner agencies, and that's because the areas where we suffer from deliberate secondary fires, you'll find that police will suffer from antisocial behaviour, and housing associations will have problematic tenants within those areas, and other partner agencies will have problems as well within those areas. So all the partners come together for these campaigns, and we go door to door and speak to people, and allow people to speak to us and tell us what the problems are, so we can work with them and work with our partner agencies to try and solve them. We're also doing, as you're aware, you had a presentation from Superintendent Andy Ryan not so long ago in relation to the work of the Violence Reduction Partnership, and that is all around targeting certain areas and adopting a public health approach. And it's something that we are keen to and continue to do throughout the year, but we absolutely recognise that there is a link between deliberate secondary fires and areas of deprivation.
And Chair, if I may, probably bring Area Manager Oakford in, and a lot of the approach you will see in the integrated risk management plan as we bring it forward through 21 through to 24 references that real focus around prevention and community safety around the inequalities that exist across Merseyside, exemplified through COVID, funnily enough, but stuff that we've known about for a long period of time. So Area Manager Oakford, would you like to comment, please?
Thanks, Chief. Yes, Chair. Just a couple of points there, and just in support of the comments that Mike made. If you do recall, I think the government around 48 hours previous to the lockdown coming into place on the 5th of November, that's when we started to see some increased tensions. So clearly the lack of formalised displays, the lack of like youth clubs being open, the lack of, you know, sort of school visits, I think communities were perhaps feeling a little bit bruised by the sort of thing. So we started to see bonfires being built up over that course of that 48 hours before the 5th of November, the lockdown coming into place. Certainly in the sort of the parts of Sefton, parts of the Wirral, we were getting out on the ground with the teams and, you know, removing bonfire material. There was one or two instances where young adults in the main were replacing it as quick as we could remove it. So we worked tirelessly. I would like to just draw a couple of points out as well. In terms of paragraph 7, we did a lot of work this year regarding sort of working with providers of fireworks and licenses to ensure that we had good compliance from members of the community, shopkeepers and others around selling of fireworks. I think it was a really good exercise we conducted this year. I won't reinforce the points in point 15 around the 4Es model. I think that was proven to be a success. In terms of paragraph 28, there's never been a more truer sense in terms of one team. You know, if you look at the extent of the staff who were involved, so clearly Mike, as a leading member of the arson team, pulls that plan together with other officers and staff, but it is a one-team approach. You know, what the work we do in fire control, the opening of OSR, our fire investigators, our operational crews, our prevention advocates, it really is a full team effort. So delivered by the central function, but clearly a lot of people are involved. And finally, if I can draw your attention to paragraphs 37, 38 and 39, we did receive some monies from our local authority partners through the community safety partnerships for tipper trucks in the absence of formalised displays, and we're grateful to them for that.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks very much, Chief, Mike and Gary. Now, if any member now wishes to make any comments or ask any questions, can you please switch on your camera and raise your hand, and with the help of the facilitator, you'll be brought in one by one. I think first of all, it's Councillor Maloney and then Councillor Brame. So Councillor Maloney, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mine's more clarification, really. It's on page 30 and it's the street intervention team. When I came off the Fire Authority in 17-18, I was actually unaware that St Helens had stopped paying the intervention team, but when I found out, I rectified it, went to the community safety and got it started again. So I'm just wondering, because it's not down here that St Helens had any street intervention team, was I too late in getting that done for this bonfire period?
Okay, thanks, Linda. Who'd like to deal with that question, please?
Mike, do you want to pick that up? You will have access to the teams and their.
The St Helens Street Intervention Team is the newest street intervention team that we have on Merseyside, and actually started up in December. So they're now a fully functioning street intervention team and currently operating in St Helens, and that's all now local authority areas who have a Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service street intervention team, all of which are receiving exceptionally positive feedback and doing some outstanding work.
Right, thank you for that.
And Chair, for me, just to add a little bit of colour to that. Street intervention teams have grown over the period of time across the districts of Merseyside, and it was about assertive engagement out on the streets. So it wasn't just about going out and socialising with young people; it was about challenging the challenging behaviour in communities. And you know, I think the brand of the Fire and Rescue Service and the skills that are held by our staff and the competencies that they demonstrate, they can do that in a really assertive but positive way, and we would then signpost them onto other agencies, or or under normal circumstances, youth clubs and so on and so forth. But it is that kind of being able to challenge those behaviours, and for some, that's the first time that they get challenged. And so we've seen the benefits, really have seen the benefits, and it's gone from strength to strength. So what was one team soon becomes 2, becomes 3, becomes 4, and as has been indicated there, St Helens being the newest team, and St Helens, probably coincides with some of that real focus on community safety back into the St Helens district as well. So really positive inroads, and that will again go from strength to strength throughout this next period.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Okay, Linda. Right, Councillor Brame.
Thank you very much, Chair, and can I thank you, Mike, for a very full report. One incident aspect that concerns me in particular is the violence at work incidents that recorded. I know it's in single figures, but obviously the welfare of our staff is of paramount concern. I wonder if you can say what were any of our staff injured? What were this year, and what steps are we able to take to mitigate that and make sure our staff are able to go about their business without a risk of undue violence or any violence at all?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. As you mentioned, the numbers are relatively low. However, any incidents of violence at work towards our staff is absolutely not acceptable. We did have one relatively severe attack against one of our prevention team members who was out working in the community in Birkenhead. And unfortunately suffered a brick being placed through the window of the vehicle he was driving, and suffered some facial injuries. Obviously a completely unacceptable attack. The response from Merseyside police was fantastic, who canvassed the area looking for the offenders, and did some follow-up over the following days in relation to CCTV and witness appeals and social media as well. The support we received from the public on social media was absolutely outstanding. Unfortunately, the police weren't able to obtain any offenders on this occasion, but we recognise it's a problem. We don't accept it. I alluded to before that the body-worn camera trial, and we hope by the bonfire period next year that all our staff, potentially operational crews as well, will have body-worn video cameras on when they're out in the community. All our fire appliances do have CCTV on. And we'll continue to work with our colleagues, particularly Merseyside Police, and I know National Fire Chiefs Council as well have picked up on the issue as well, and are doing some work. But we recognise it's not acceptable, and we'll work. And it's not just the bonfire period; we will work on this all year round with our partners.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, Allan. Right, does anybody else wish to make a question or a comment?
Chair, if I may, I'll just bring Ernie Manager Oakford in, just in relation to the way that we utilise what it's described as a Trojan fire engine as well.
Yeah,
it has an impact, and certainly it kind of reinforces the messages that Mike's just presented there in regards to protecting our staff. So, Ernie Manager Oakford.
Thanks, Chief. Chair, just to advise members really an update, you're absolutely right. Violence at work we take exceptionally seriously, and we've had a long established reporting mechanism for all of our operational staff, or indeed other prevention staff who are on the ground operating and delivering those services. So we do encourage all of our staff to report them. Some of those violence at work incidents may well be just verbal abuse rather than a physical attack. And those numbers have really sort of plummeted over the years, as we've had a long history of working with communities around prevention. In particular, over the key nights, so draw your attention to paragraph 29. On the key nights, the 31st of October, which historically was sort of the night after Mischief Night, we'd put on a Trojan appliance, and again on the 6th and 7th of November. So that appliance is staffed with Merseyside and Merseyside police officers, and can sort of patrol known hotspot areas. So if we see an increase in potential violence at work incidents, we deploy a sort of part COVID sort of fire appliance in an attempt to sort of track down those perhaps mainly young people who cause that sort of who intend to cause some disruption, not just to Merseyside fire service, but you'll historically have read reports in newspapers around buses being attacked and bricks thrown at buses and other things like that. So we work closely with our partners to try and tackle those issues.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks very much. I see Councillor Grace would like to ask a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I know Gary, you did touch on schools. I wondered how, I realised this year was a lot more challenging. I'm not even sure if schools were in that period. But in general terms, going forward, are there plans to go into both primary and secondary schools? I know quite a few of us councillors have received the regular emails from, it's basically RSPCA generated, but there's also concerns with vulnerable adults with the, it's almost like the cultural thing of Bonfire Night, the noise of the fireworks as well as the, not exactly the anarchy, but the slight sense of fear, and that sort of cultural change in a way has to, I feel, involves schools, and I just wondered if you plan to take them on as partners going forward.
Yes, I mean, historically, we usually have although we have a defined reporting period, Councillor Grace, for the bonfire period for the statistics, but we do have a long lead-in. So under normal circumstances, we would routinely have staff and our operational crews visiting schools, delivering the bonfire presentation, and we have some online sort of learning resources. What we had to do this year is send those messages out in an attempt that the schools could deliver them rather than us do it face to face. So that was a particular challenge to us this year, and we've been challenged in other areas of our prevention. We know our prevention messages work when we are actually on the front foot and we're talking to people directly. That's the best way to do it. So as soon as we get to sort of normal working and normal sort of life again, we will indeed be going back to schools to conduct that sort of face-to-face engagement.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Does anybody else wish to come in? Yeah, Councillor Knight. Sorry, Councillor Knight, you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. What I want to ask, the street intervention teams, it's got that you're doing Liverpool, Sefton, Wirral and Knowsley, 38 evenings. Is that broken down into wards?
We don't have that information in the report, but we can. They do deploy to certain areas. We can break that down into wards. So when we go into those areas at the request of the local authority, we certainly can break that information down into the particular wards that the teams have been into.
Only because certain wards have got a high level of deprivation, and I was just wondering whether it was broke down in that way.
Yeah, and just Councillor, just to kind of confirm as well, we use a little bit of science behind it. So the way we deploy the teams is based on some of the kind of the emerging information that we're getting in around particular localities, but certainly for members of the authority, there have been occasions where I've been approached by members of the authority to support a particular community that's coming under a bit of pressure from gangs of young people. So that is available to all councillors really, but so we are kind of coordinating ourselves. We genuinely drive it through the local authority, but if a particular area is being blighted, and it's emerging, then it's far better to nip some of this stuff in the bud. So, if we were talking about maybe the Speak Garston area, and you were aware of something, then by all means you could approach me or the assistant chief or the area manager or Mike, and then we could direct the street intervention team into those particular wards with some kind of knowledge of the circumstances and the details that we would be trying to address, and equally being able to signpost them into community groups and other kind of focused areas within that proximity.
Oh, that's good. Thanks for that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I believe Councillor Finneran wishes to come in.
Chair, yeah, just to confirm that in the Knowsley one, I've been invited when we do our ward one, and the fire service, police, we all go around. But like what you said, Phil, it's if we know that there's a certain area in our ward, then that will be sort of like done a couple of times and people will be made more aware of that we're there. And the councillors are invited to go along and do this walk through the ward, and maybe put some information through doors and what have you. But I know over the bonfire one, we were offered to go out, and my ward in the south was more around Wood Road, where there was a big field, and that was one of the points that we were getting. So yeah, it does go really on the ward system. Well, that's the way I think it is anyway. But thanks for the presentation. It was brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, and Chair, for me, Mike referenced the kind of community safety campaigns, and Gary's talked about face-to-face engagement. And we do, as we know, we do a lot of work around preventing fires in people's homes, getting across thresholds. But actually, a lot of the really positive work is around the place that we operate within as well, and trying to kind of change behaviours around place, and people own the place in which they live, and firefighters, supporting the communities in that regard as well. So, that really kind of focusing on people, but people who exist in a place, and and challenging some of the inequalities that exist across Merseyside, and that's a really significant amount of the work that Mike and his team do. But you do that in a similar vein. You go into an area, you want the community in that area to feel so they are cared about. And when they have firefighters and community safety staff who are knocking on the doors, checking on their welfare, checking if they've got any issues, resolving some of the obvious kind of concerns that they've got there and then with local ward councillors or colleagues within housing or within the police. That's that real kind of whole, as I say, whole systems approach to tackling the issues which are affecting people day to day. But we become really much more accessible if you do it on block and are really visible. And equally, as I said before, many times, the brand of the fire and rescue service, sometimes we get information that others wouldn't necessarily share with the police, and then we can go and act in a really positive way to improve the environment that people are living in.
Chair, can I just come back and say, I think I think I've been doing it now for just on 2 years. We've been sort of going out, and I must admit, the more we go out, the more people are talking to. Where before, when we went out, it was knock at the door, thank you very much, go away. But now they will speak, and I think it's the confidence that the fire service, the police, and everything have now got on the doorstep. And maybe the more it goes on, the more helpful it'll be. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Knight.
Oh, thanks for that, Edna. I would really like to get involved in something like that, but I haven't had any notice about anything. And I'm glad you've said that, Phil. The reason why some of the fire officers were attacked in Speak, and our community put it on Facebook, and they were fuming over what had gone on, and they couldn't give the fire authority any more praise than what they've done. And I just think the councillors, we didn't know anything about the street intervention teams, but if I'd have known, I'd have been out there, with the fire authority.
Yeah, look, and by all means, as soon as we get through COVID, we will be back into around community safety campaigning, and self-evidently, even in the report says it, but it's
But Speak community was appalled by the way the fire authority was treated. So that's how much respect that have got it in our communities of Speak and Garston.
Yeah, and look at it, and I think the real important part of it is about mobilising the community, mobilising the ward councillors, mobilising South Liverpool Housing, and mobilising the police, community support, and all going as really visually en masse into a community, and that is really where we get the biggest impact. That we are all in this together, we're all trying to kind of work to improve the community, the area, and so on and so forth. And then you get that information and intelligence shared, and then the community feel really invested in. And my firefighters, they live in the communities that we're talking about. They're an integral part of it, and so we all want to improve, the place in which we live. And we certainly don't want individuals to feel as though they can't go out in the streets, or they're worried about being attacked if they're part and parcel of an operational crew. So breaking down all those barriers, breaking down all those kind of issues, and creating those relationships is part and parcel of what that community safety campaigning is all about. So as soon as we get through the COVID period, Doreen, you can have it from me. The first community that we'll go back into will be Speak Garston.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you.
Okay, can I just add, prior to COVID, I've been around part of my own ward with representatives of the fire authority knocking on doors, and the positive reception that you get from people is absolutely fantastic. And believe it or not, you don't always get that as a local councillor. I suspect it was because I was with people from the fire authority. I think people out there welcome the fire authority. We're pleased to see them, and long may that continue. Right, does anybody else wish to come in at this stage? No? Okay. Well, if we move on formally to the recommendation, which is that members note the content of the report and the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic had on the delivery of the Bonfire Plan 2020. So if I put that to the committee, please, I'll assume that silence means it's approved.
Agreed.
Is that
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And before I move on, can I just thank again the Chief, Gary and Mike for the excellent presentation and all the work that's gone into this particular point. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So moving on now, I don't think there's any other items on the agenda. So if we can just thank everybody for their attendance this afternoon. Again, apologise for the late start and thank everybody for their patience. Just to remind everybody that the next meeting of this committee will be on the 8th of April, and I now formally close the meeting and it'll be ended for all participants. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Bye.